What is up guys, Morton here from SteamFirst.com with a review for the puzzle platformer Constant C, developed by International Game System and released March 7, 2014 on Steam for $10. Puzzle platformers are usually pretty hit or miss. They require a good difficulty curve so they don't get boring as you continue, a large variety in puzzles to keep things interesting, and enough mechanics to keep things from getting redundant. Constant C does it all very well and also has an intriguing story on top of it. You play as an emergency rescue robot on a spaceship used for scientific experiments. There was some sort of disaster during an experiment involving time distortion, and all of the scientists appear to be missing. With the help of an AI computer, you travel around the ship looking for storage devices to figure out what happened and how to fix it. The story is actually pretty well done. The science fiction aspects are interesting, and even though there's not much character development, what is there does add a more human aspect to the robotic characters. But the way it's told is rather boring. After you pick up a certain number of storage devices, you get to watch a little cutscene that has some background information, some interesting and some not so much, and other than that, the story is told entirely from the AI talking to you in between levels. Overall though, the story gets a 3.5 out of 5. It's well written, although there are a surprising amount of typos, and the story is interesting, but you can sometimes go over an hour without progressing the story at all, and when it does progress, it does so quickly, and then it's back to the platforming. The platforming is quite good though. The entire space station is frozen in time with the exception of a little area around you. Because of this, blocks and levers and things can be suspended in midair until you get close enough to them. Once they're within your 4-dimensional stabilizer field, the fancy name for the field that allows time to continue around you, they'll be able to move. They move in whatever way gravity is pulling, which you control, and they'll move until they are no longer in range of your field. As I mentioned, you can control gravity as well. If there are spikes in your way, no problem. Just rotate the screen and walk on what was the ceiling. These two mechanics combine to make for some incredibly difficult levels and allow for multiple solutions in some situations, which is always nice. Most of the puzzles involve getting yourself to a block and then moving it without crushing yourself. There's a lot of ways to do this though. Sometimes it requires changing your momentum with gravity shifting to get around saw blades, sometimes you'll need to make blocks stay in midair to block lasers. There's just a lot of variety. I never found myself bored or feeling like I was doing the same thing over and over. Every stage had a unique solution for the most part, and they got progressively harder as the game went on, which is really all you can ask for. The gameplay gets a 4.5 out of 5. Everything was solid for the most part, and the only issue I have is sometimes it seemed like you could swap gravity far faster than other times. This led to sometimes thinking you have a solution, but then finding out you can't change your momentum fast enough for it to work. But it was never that annoying, it just meant looking for a different solution. The soundtrack adds quite a lot to the gameplay as well. All of the sounds in Constant C are appropriate, the music is really good and feels perfect for the game, and the sound effects are all excellent. It's actually pretty hard to find something to complain about as far as sound goes. There's no voice acting in this game, which is actually a really good call. Most of the dialogue is between robots or AI, so it would have gotten pretty annoying to have a bunch of robotic voices throughout the game. The sound gets a 5 out of 5, it really is that good, and I truly can't think of anything to complain about as far as sound goes. As far as replayability goes, Constant C has a fair amount. There's not really much of a reason to play through the campaign multiple times other than to complete all the achievements, some of which you will probably not complete your first time through. But there's also a mode called Time Attack Mode, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. You have to complete as many stages as possible before you run out of time, and you gain more time by completing stages or finding clocks on a stage that give you extra seconds. There's a leaderboard to compare yourself to others, and it's a good challenge to complete these stages so fast because a lot of them require a fair amount of precision. Replayability gets a 3.5 out of 5. There's really no reason to play the main game again. There's no side content or New Game Plus or anything like that. But the Time Attack mode is pretty fun, and if you're competitive and want to compete for high scores, it's a good option. Overall, Constant C gets a 4 out of 5. It's a very solid game that does almost everything right. The puzzles are challenging, the soundtrack is great, and the story is interesting. And for $10, it'll last you quite a long time. It took me about 6 hours to finish the main game. Obviously, everybody will complete the puzzles at a different rate, but for $10, anything more than 3 hours is basically worth it anyways. And that isn't counting the Time Attack mode for even more replayability. It's worth noting that when you turn the game on, it says that it recommends using a gamepad to play instead of a mouse and keyboard, but I had absolutely no problems playing without a gamepad, so don't let that stop you from checking this game out. If you're looking for a fun, interesting puzzle platformer, Constant C is definitely worth looking into.